Hi, everybody. I'm Louisa, and I work for a service design consultancy called Fjord. Before I launch into my talk, I noticed that nobody's really defined what they mean by service design. So, question, does anybody want me to say what I think service design is? Hands up if you do. Right, OK, that's enough hands. OK, so one way of thinking about it is think about a service that we all know. We might not love it, but we all know how it works, right? It's the Postal Service. Anywhere you live in the world, pretty much, more or less, you've got one of these. And it's got lots of different touch points. You've got the box in the street that you put things into. You've got the little pieces of paper that you have to put on the things that you put in the box on the street. You've got the people behind the counter who might or might not help you. You've got the guy who comes to your house and brings you things. And I don't remember ever being taught to use the Postal Service. I don't know anybody who does remember being taught to use the Postal Service, and yet we all do. The thing is that we never think about how it actually works. We never think about the sorting machines, or the logistics, or the trucks and buses and magical elves, or any of the other things that get things from point A to point B. It just works. And that's what a well-designed service is, in my definition. It's something that takes all of that complexity, all of that mess, if you like, and pushes it into the background so that the things that we normal people engage with are the things that we need to do, the things that we love to do, the things that we want to do. And so that's what I think service design is, and that's what we try to do at Fjord. My personal role at Fjord as head of strategy is to think about what's next, what's coming, and how we're going to deal with it, what we're going to do about it. And so I've been thinking rather a lot about a lot of the things that my colleagues have been talking about today. And moreover, I am also an anthropologist. By the way, that was the only slide that I had, so no more slides. You're just going to have to look at me. Sorry about that. I'm also an anthropologist. And one of my personal heroes is this guy called Joseph Campbell. And I actually pirated the name of this talk from him, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. What Campbell was an absolute specialist in was stories, human stories, mythologies, religions, folk tales. He properly understood human stories and why we tell them. And I think that this and service design are really closely related, which I will hopefully explain in the coming few minutes. Right, so I want to start with a question. What is the soundtrack of your life? Don't worry, there's not going to be a quiz. I see some people kind of looking confused. I see people scribbling or looking on their iPhones. The thing is, even if you don't have an answer to the question, you know what I mean, right? Everybody understands the question. That's because we think of our lives in narrative terms, all of us. It's part of what makes us uniquely human. Our lives are our stories. Whether it's sketch comedy or epic poetry or Shakespearean tragedy, that varies from day to day, I'd say. But we all have this in common. Stories. It's the way we work. And as Joe Campbell liked to say, one of the reasons why stories are so vital to us is that they are our way of dealing with the fact that we all die. Someday, all of us are not going to be here anymore. And stories are a way of coping with that. Stories are a tiny little bit of immortality. And I would suggest that this is the real reason why we're all so hopelessly addicted to things like Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. They're ways for us to tell little stories every day to each other. And that's why it feels so great when somebody you like, when somebody you admire, retweets you. Because that little 140-character story that you've told has resonated with that person to the degree that they want to turn it around and pass it on to everyone that they know. And I work with this stuff. I know how ephemeral it is. I know how temporary and transient it all is. And still, when I get retweeted by somebody I admire, it feels like a tiny little bit of immortality. It makes me feel really good. And I think that's something that we all share. Another thing that stories do for us is help us to explain the world to ourselves and to each other. They are how we understand what has happened, history, parables, what is happening, who we are today, in relation to everyone around us, and who we want to be. So we have parables and fairy tales that we learn from childhood that that contain these triggers about the world being an interesting or scary or dangerous place, and some of the decisions that we'll have to make as we get older. And as we get older, we remember those tales, and they live with us. We have religion, which is entirely made up of stories, and entire societies are built on those stories. We have Hollywood movies, which create archetypes, people that we want to be, people that we want to emulate, people that we admire and look up to. The stories that we love the best are the ones that feel like they really belong to us. Stories can be more important than our own lives. And if you need evidence of this, think about the millions of starving Hindu people who are surrounded by edible cattle. Why aren't they eating them? It's their stories. The stories mean more to them, the fabric of their society, than whether one person lives or dies. And I think for stories to belong to us means a couple of different things. There's a school of thought that says that one of the reasons why we love reality television as much as we do is because there's kind of an everyman complex going on there. You look at Big Brother or, I don't know, Temptation Island back in the day, and you think, actually, that could be me. That guy isn't any cooler than me. There's this kind of everyman connection. You feel like if that guy can get on TV, then I can get on TV, and you feel like you're a part of it, yeah? We also love them because we can sometimes decide what happens. We can vote on who gets kicked off the island. We can vote on who wins at Eurovision. These things make us feel like the stories belong to us. And the most compelling way for a story to belong to us is if we tell it. And of course, the most compelling stories that you can tell are the stories about yourself. And stories about yourself aren't just about me telling you what I like and what I hate and what happened to me yesterday. As I tell my stories, I learn about me, I learn about the person I'm telling them to. I learn from their reactions and their responses, and that builds my story up. And I think that great services, a lot of great services, help us to tell our stories. And further, I think that the next design challenge and the next design opportunity is unprecedented and massive. And it is based on the fact that at the beginning of 2012, there were roughly 2.3 billion people on this planet, and a little over 5 billion connected objects. Depending on who you ask, there might be as many as 20 or even 50 billion connected objects in the next decade. What does that mean? Well, for one thing, that means a lot more people are going to have a lot more objects that produce a lot more data. Pretty much anything that I do, if I have got the right kit with me, can be measured, mapped, marked down for future reference. Where I go, who I go with, what I eat and drink, how much I exercise, how well I sleep, where I travel, where I stay, what I like, what I don't like, what I read, what I listen to. All of this data about human behavior means a lot of chaos. Human behavior is de facto chaotic. And what we're doing about it today is interesting. We, as designers, we have this sort of militant nostalgia. We love to make artifacts. Whether they're objects or interfaces, we like to make artifacts. And so right now, most of what we're doing with all of this richness of data is making artifacts. We make data visualizations, which are beautiful. They're stunning. They're not always that meaningful. And when they are, they take quite a lot of overhead to get your head around. Or we make, my favorite, control panels. Little skeuomorphic twiddly knobs and levers that we can pull and push to control the things around us. Now, I don't know about you, but I have a negative amount of time to spend twiddling knobs and pulling levers. I don't think this is a sustainable way for us to go about managing all of our data. I think that we have a very large challenge in terms of interaction and comprehension and value. So if we are going to use all of this richness of data to tell better stories, richer stories about ourselves to each other that we can really learn from and benefit from, we've got to come up with better ways. And Interaction is only the first problem. So how do I engage with objects? How do I engage with data? How do I decide what goes and what stays? The other side of it is value. What benefit do I gain? What benefit does business gain from me using all of this data? And for me, it all comes down to one thing, and that's choice. Because my life might make a lot of data, but my life is not made up of data. My life is made up of 1,000 tiny choices that I make every day, from the moment I leave my house until I go to sleep at night. I decide when to cross the street and when not to cross the street. I decide the people in this room that I most want to speak to. Sometimes I have no idea how I made these decisions. Most decisions I'm not even aware I'm making at all, but the ones that I am aware that I'm making, I might not know how. Cognitive science tells us that roughly maximum 20% of any face-to-face conversation is to do with the words that are coming out of our mouths. The rest is body language and eye contact and pheromones and context and atmospheric noise, etc. So earlier, Sami used an old quote from Arthur C. Clarke, who said, any technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic. I would say that we all carry magic around with us in our heads every day. What we consider intuition is very likely evidence-based decision-making that happens at hyperspeed. So if we take that and apply it to data, we start to see some interesting opportunities. Because machines are capable of processing, often a lot faster than humans. What machines aren't great at is making the connections, is making the stories. So David is going to talk to you in a while about one of his projects, which is called Weavers. And I'm going to steal a little bit of his thunder now. What Weavers are bots, essentially, and he'll show you how they're made and talk some more about them. But what they do is they go out and they gather content. They gather content from the magical interweb, from the social web, and they present it back in the form of a blog or tweets, things like that. And the thing is, it's a bot. It doesn't know the answers, but when I go and look at my Weaver's blog, I can see a story there. I can see reasoning behind what she's posted. When I started thinking about this, I was talking to one of the designers at Fjord about it, and he reminded me of an experiment that was done in human cognition a while back. And I reference this just to drive home the power of what we're capable of doing. You all know about subliminal messaging, yes? Flash a word in front of somebody's face so briefly that they don't consciously process it, but they respond. So, one experiment, flash the word walk. Subject gets up and starts walking, is stopped 5 paces in and asked, where are you going? Without any hesitation. Oh, I'm going to get some water, I'm thirsty. No, been subliminally suggested, but this is how powerful we are in terms of pattern spotting, in terms of constructing narratives. We are able to come up with a story around anything. And so something that I think is really interesting is, and that I would like for all of us to explore, is new ways to bring the human capacity for pattern spotting and for storytelling into this chaotic world of personal data streams and its aggregate big data. I think if we can find clever ways to allow machines, as David once said to me, to pose the questions that only humans can answer, if we are able to answer those questions for ourselves and for others, we can gain a tremendous amount of benefit. I'll give an example. The quantified self, currently, is largely defined as fitness data. How much I exercise, what forms of transportation I take, sometimes how well I sleep, sometimes how much I eat. These things are related to lots of other things. If all I have is an app that's benchmark-driven, that tells me, right, according to our vision of what it takes to be a healthy person, you have failed because you've not taken the stairs 4 days in a row. The machine doesn't know that my knee was bothering me, and that's why I didn't take the stairs. It's just drawing a conclusion and telling me what to do, which may or may not work. If, on the other hand, I could see my weight over time, my exercise patterns over time, I'm a human being. I can make the connection. If I see weight go up, exercise go down, maybe there's a connection there. If, on the other hand, I see weight go up, exercise constant, maybe there's something else going on. Maybe I'm not sleeping well. Maybe I've been traveling too much. Maybe I'm eating differently. Maybe I'm ill. I think that by limiting ourselves to seeing only a very small part of causality in our behaviors, we limit our understanding of what makes us healthy, what makes us happy, what makes us feel better, what makes us more productive to ourselves and for each other. And I'm really curious as to what would happen if, for instance, my weaver could bring me a whole bunch of information about what I do and where I go. What kinds of connections would I see? Would I see, for instance, that when I spend time with certain of my friends, I sleep better? Would I find that when I travel to Helsinki in the winter, I am calmer than when I travel to Madrid in the summer? I don't know. I don't know if any of these things are true. But the idea that the combination of factors that actually affects us, what music we listen to, what we're reading at the time, all of these things impact how well we sleep. We know that intuitively. But this is not something that we can feed a machine and say, answer my question. We need to answer the questions ourselves. And I think once we do that, not only will we be able to learn how to be individually better for ourselves, we can also learn from each other and collectively make a better system. There's a real opportunity here, and I hope this doesn't sound wrong, for personal responsibility. I think a lot of times, and I'm guilty of this as well, we get so carried away with technology that we get so excited about what it can do that we kind of take ourselves out of the equation. We think if we make more technology, more things that will tell me what's going on, then everything will be better. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think we need to participate more, lean forward into it, and keep our eye on the human. There are things that only we can do. So, yeah, we've heard a lot about education, so I'm not going to bang on about that topic, but in terms of human sustainability, one of the really big questions is around health and wellness. And this is where I see a really obvious gap that we can start to fill with all of this data. So one of the biggest sustainability problems in the Western world, in the developed world, is the fact that we are getting older, we are living longer. This sounds like a good thing, but actually it's a massive crisis. We're getting older, and sometimes we get ill, and we did not plan for this. We don't have the money for it. We can't support it. So how can we solve that? We can solve that not just as individuals by living better, but by helping each other live better. And all of the connected objects and all of the data that they generate can help us to do that, but it has to be our decision in order for it to really take root. So, yeah, I think that what we should be focusing on is choice. Choice of context and decision-making that happens based on the information that we have at hand. And there's an analogy, going back to Joe Campbell, that I like quite a lot. It's a very old Hindu myth. In the ancient Hindu mythology, the gods and the anti-gods used to be at war all the time. They were at war for tens of thousands of millennia. And as the story goes, this one particular war, they decided this isn't getting us anywhere. We're going to call a truce. What we really need to do is mine the cosmic ocean for immortality. They made this decision collectively. There's no record of how. So they got the cosmic mountain and upended it and stuck it in the middle of the ocean. And they got the serpent of life, and they wrapped it around the mountain. And the gods on the head end and the anti-gods on the tail end started having this massive tug of war. And they started churning the ocean. And after about 1,000 years, this cloud of toxic smoke came out of it. And it was completely poisonous. And they had to stop. And they discussed what to do, because it was clear to them that their work was not finished. But they didn't want to destroy the world. And it was clear that somebody needed to take this in and neutralize it and hang on to it so that the work could continue. And so Shiva, the god of yoga, put it in his beggar's bowl and drank it down and held it in his throat through his expertise, through yoga. And because he did that, they were able to continue the work. And after another 1,000 years or so, the moon came out of the sea, and the sun came out of the sea, and the medicines came out of the sea, and eventually the butter of immortality. And I think this is a really interesting analogy for the place that we are today. We have this enormous vastness of technology, of resources, of data, of behavior, of connections to each other, more than we've ever had before. And we're all of us, and all of our clients, and all of our compatriots on the technology side, we're all trying to figure out what to do with it. We're all trying to figure, we know that it has enormous power. We know that it could do amazing things, and we're trying to figure out how. And there's this fear, I think, sometimes, that we're going to do the wrong thing, that we're going to release something horrible into the world, or that we're going to destroy something. I think that's okay. I think that that's why we have this expertise. I think that's what we should be working toward, quite humbly, to take this in and hold it at bay so that we can continue the work, so that we can keep on going until we find where this is really going to take us. And I think where it's going to take us is closer to ourselves, so that we're all the hero with 1,000 faces. Thank you.
So I think you now fully understand why I love her so much. Fantastic. Thank you. It was like, whew. Who has a question? This is strong stuff. Goes really deep.
It's still there.
Still there.
His nickname, which I cannot possibly pronounce, is Blue Throat. His throat has been blue ever since. It's still there.
Okay. I sense questions, but I don't see the hand.
Oh, come on.
I go there. I follow my gut. Like, I sense. Yeah, no. You always look at your enemy, because then you are not selected. Do you have a question? No? So, come on. Nobody really? Don't. Okay.
Come on, Alexander, you ask me one.
How can we all talked about, perfect.
Yesterday I read on Twitter that you presented that story to your mother.
Yeah.
And that she contributed to your story. So I would like to know in which part that
what she got me to think more about is, I didn't say it explicitly this time through, I'm sorry about that, but what she said was that it strikes her that what we've focused on until now in terms of services is how to connect with each other or to connect with information. But what I seem to be on about, and she was right, is how we connect with ourselves and then take that sort of self-knowledge and understanding and propagate it back outward. So if you like, it's almost an inversion. It's this idea that by looking inward, you get more depth, and then you can pass more depth outward again. A bit philosophical, but, you know, runs in the family.
Okay.